We'll just give folks a minute here to sign in. Very popular subject today. We'll have a couple of hundred county officials on the line. I'm your host, Stephen Aquario, Executive Director of the New York State Association of Counties, and welcome to today's session on navigating New York's new short-term rental law. Today is March 27th, 2025, and we'll be underway in just 30 seconds. If you could just hold the line for 30 seconds. Okay, folks, thanks again for joining us today. I'm Stephen Aquario, Executive Director of the New York State Association of Counties, and I'm very pleased to present today Navigating New York's Short-Term Rental Law. And at the outset here, I want to thank the legislators responsible for this law, Senator Michelle Hinchey, then Assemblymember Patricia Fahey, who is now a member of the New York State Senate. Thank the entire NYSAC legislative team, and in particular, its legislative director, Ryan Gregoire, for his outstanding advocacy to Chapter 2 laws pertaining to this subject matter. When I think back about our intent in passing this law, it was to help communities better manage housing availability and affordability, while at the same time addressing safety issues, taxation issues related to sales and occupancy tax, again, the safety of the home where individuals were staying, and also to address taxation which had been legally owed. These are not new taxes that were owed, but taxes that had been legally owed but yet remained uncollected. The law became effective, or becomes effective, in April 21st of 2025. And with effective taxation issues relating back to March 1st of 2025. This is our second webinar. The first was very widely attended event offered in conjunction with the New York State Hospitality and Tourism Association, where Ryan Gregoire participated as well. This session is being recorded and will be made available at NYSAC TV YouTube channel, which is on the NYSAC website, nysac.org's website, under the webinar tab. Finally, to submit your questions, we encourage you to do that. There's a question bar right on your screen there. Please submit your questions right now or throughout today's session. We'll go from 1 to 2 p.m. We'll keep it at the hour mark, and we'll try to address as many questions as we can. So please type in your questions. We will also send around and circulate an updated frequently asked questions flyer that we have already 3 or 4 or 5 pages of FAQs. We will update that FAQ chart with today's questions and answers and circulate that to all the registrants who registered for this event today. Again, type your questions into the question tab, and I'm pleased to present Ryan Gregoire, the NYSAC Legislative Director, and we also have one of our partners from Deckard Technologies, Dustin Rylick, to talk about navigating this new law and how his services have helped those around the country and those within New York on how to set up registries and otherwise manage their registry and also deal with taxation collection. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ryan Gregoire. Ryan.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and good afternoon, everyone. Joining us as well is Dave Lucas, our NYSAC Director of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. Dave has been helping us to navigate this law since prior to its inception. And now as we begin with implementation, he's been a trusted source in assisting the understanding of this new legislation. So before we go to Dustin, what I would like to do is take a few moments here and really walk through the different parameters of this legislation. And before I dive into the details, I do want to say for everyone that we have heard from many counties, there was a lot of confusion. Certainly we understand that. When Stephen talked about passing two pieces of legislation, what he was referring to was a bill that passed last session and that was signed into law on December 21st. That was Senate Bill 885-C. That was the original enabling statute. There was a chapter amendment negotiated between the legislature, the governor, and all the stakeholders to amend that law because even though the legislature passed it, it wasn't sufficient enough, and there was some issues with the way that the legislation was passed. So we negotiated a chapter amendment, which becomes a new bill in the new legislative session. So that legislation, Senate Bill 820 of 2025, is now Chapter 99 of this year's laws. That is the statute that I'm going to walk through because it amended the original one. That is the law that we're all working under, Senate Bill 820. And again, we have a copy of that on our website, NYSAC.org. If you hover over the Issues tab, there's a section that says short-term rentals. If you click on that, that's kind of our landing page, our repository for our FAQ document, legislation, contact information for Dustin if you choose to reach out and engage with Deckard, and an overview of what I just described verbally here. So let's get into this bill. It's an 18-page bill. It covers three primary areas of interest to counties: the establishment, creation, and implementation of a registry, the collection of sales tax, both state and local, and the collection and remittance of local hotel motel occupancy taxes. So on the registry, I'm going to start with the registry, then I'm going to talk about sales tax, and then I'm going to talk about occupancy tax. On the registry, short-term rental units have to be registered with New York City or a municipality that has an established registry, or the new county registry system to implement and offer their home for rent. Okay, so let me just underscore that. Every single STR in New York State has to be registered with either New York City system, a municipality that already has a system, or the new county registries. They all have to have an evacuation diagram identifying all means of egress. They must have posted emergency phone numbers for police, fire, poison control. They must have a working fire extinguisher, and they must have insurance at a minimum of $300,000 for property and bodily injury. This insurance can be covered by a booking service. Booking service meaning, think booking.com, Airbnb, VRBO. There's actually 140 of them across the nation. That's a booking service. They also cannot be a rent-regulated apartment, and that primarily pertains to our friends in New York City, but there are some rent-regulated apartments across the state. They must also comply with any local county health law and safety requirements, as well as municipal code. So just about all of our towns have some type of sanitary code on the book, or local code for code compliance. They have to meet those requirements as well. All STRUs will be subject to applicable state and hotel motel taxes, as noted in Article 28 and 29 of the tax law. And their registration is valid for 2 years. Booking services are going to be required to maintain the following data, as are STR hosts. They have to have the date of each stay and the number of guests, the cost of each stay, including an itemized breakdown of sales and occupancy tax collected, and a record of registration with DOS, New York State Department of State, and the applicable county local registry. Again, booking services will have to maintain the same data. Booking services are going to be required to report this information to each county beginning 90 days after the enactment of this law. So on March 1st, that 90-day countdown started. The county then must share this data with our local municipalities, town, city, village, within 60 days of receipt. That's in the law. Booking services may require hosts to consent to these terms and conditions, but there's not a mandate on that. It's a may, okay? And then the other piece that I wanted to know on the registry is that the registry takes effect 275 days after the enactment of this chapter, which is November 22nd, 2025. Up until November 22nd, local governments can implement a local registry. However, once we cross November 22nd this year, local governments will not be permitted to establish a registry, only counties. All right, let me talk about registration, right? So that's the governing of the STRUs that I just went over. Let me talk about registration. Counties are required to maintain a registration system unless they are New York City or unless they enact a local law opting out of the registry system. To opt out, a county must, by December 31st, 2025, adopt a local law stating that the county opts not to establish a registration system. Counties can repeal this opt-out and rejoin the registration system whenever they choose to do so. 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, 5 days after the fact, doesn't matter. Again, STRU registration lasts for 2 years. Local governments, your towns, cities, villages, and your towns, cities, and villages always have the right to prohibit short-term rental units if they so choose. They always have the discretion to implement local laws to prohibit them. Counties are authorized to do shared services with another county for the administration of the registry. And again, we are mandated to share any data to booking services to ensure that the booking service can verify with their host that they have a registration number to the county registry or the local registry. And no short-term rental unit will be registered until they pay all registration fees as established by the county. Now, what does that mean? This fee can include the actual and necessary costs associated with the construction, operation, and maintenance of the county registry and for the enforcement of this article. Okay, so that's the registration process. Exceptions, there's a couple exceptions. If your county has a temporary emergency shelter permitted by DOH, those are not eligible to become an STRU. If there's a municipal ban on short-term rental units, those properties cannot be available for booking. And if someone is simply house sitting for less than 30 days, so let's, for example, say Stephen went on vacation, he called up Ryan and said, Ryan, can you watch my dogs for 2 weeks while I'm in Aruba? That would not be an eligible unit for short-term rental. He could not go and host his house on Airbnb if I'm house sitting for him. Penalties. There's been a lot of questions on the penalties. Well, what happens, Ryan, if someone doesn't register with us? Well, there's an entire section of the bill on this, section 6 of the bill. Non-compliance with the registry will result in a booking service fine enforceable by the Attorney General or the county. Hosts, individual hosts. If I'm an individual host, I can be fined up to $200 on a third violation. There's a violation notice process that goes into effect. But these fines cannot be imposed until November 22nd, 2025. So a lot of counties already have a registry on the books right now. You are not permitted to fine a host or a booking service until 275 days after March 1st, which is November 22nd. A booking service can be violated by the terms of this law and may be issued a fine up to $500 per day per violation until the violation is cured. And again, just to reinforce this message for local governments who are on with us, if you have a code on the book, and let's say you have a fine for improper egress, okay, and it's a $50 fine, you still have the authority to fine that host for non-compliance with your local code. They have to maintain every single code that anyone else has to do, including complying with county health and safety requirements as well. Enforcement, how do we actually go about collecting these fines and making sure people are on the registry? Well, there's two vehicles to do that. Counties can enter into agreements with booking agencies to help enforce registry and compliance. They can also refer issues to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General of the state of New York is authorized to bring action for any violations. Any county, city, town, or village operating a registry can notify the AG for violation enforcement of the registry provisions. Data sharing. In addition to what I already said about booking services being required to share data to the county, they're also going to be required to share to the State Department of State on a monthly basis an electronic report aggregating the number of STRU guest stays. So the state DOS is going to have basically a statewide dashboard to show where are these things operating by county, to try and get a sense of what's out there across the state of New York. That's the registry, that's enforcement, that's data sharing. I'm now going to pivot to sales tax. Sales tax is pretty straightforward.
Let me pause, Ryan, for just a minute.
Yes.
We are not using a PowerPoint. We're taking some questions that are you seeing a PowerPoint? No. Ryan is reading off of his notes. He will probably incorporate a lot of what Ryan is saying into the FAQs and other information that we will send out after this webinar to capture Ryan's comments. Ryan, back to you.
Yes, and we'll also be sharing a memo to all of the folks on this call with all the information that I've already talked about. So we'll have both documents for you.
Thank you.
Okay, sales tax. This is section 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 of this legislation. They update the definition to include STRUs for sales tax. Right now, sales tax up until March 1st of this year was not being collected on short-term rental units. Now it is, effective March 1st. New York City is empowered to collect a $2 per day tax for the operation of the Jacob Javits Convention Center, which starts April 1st of this year. A booking service shall collect sales tax under Article 29 of the state tax law, effect March 1st, 2025. Again, a booking service shall collect sales tax under Article 29 starting on March 1st this year. An operator of an STRU using a booking agency to collect the sales tax is relieved from having to collect that tax. It's the booking service's responsibility as long as that host can show that the booking service was facilitating the occupancy. So let me pause there for a minute and give a real world example. I'm a host. I use VRBO to list my property. As long as I can demonstrate that I'm using VRBO, VRBO is collecting and remitting sales tax on my behalf to New York State. If Ryan Gregoire decides I'm not going to use a platform, I'm going to operate on my own without a platform, you're permitted to do so, but I, Ryan Gregoire, have to register with state tax and finance to collect and remit both state and local sales tax to New York State. And then, just like every other vendor in the marketplace, state tax and finance will remit the check down to the county by each county jurisdiction, geographic area. That's sales tax, pretty straightforward. Occupancy tax, a little different. Where a county has not exercised the opt-out. So you're in the game. You've got a registry. Your county and any local government in the county is authorized and empowered to impose their hotel motel occupancy on STRUs. That is blanket authority provided under this state law. Any local government that has an occupancy tax in place is authorized and empowered to adopt and amend their local laws to impose occupancy tax on short-term rental units. I say that because even though you're granted the authority under this law, I would very much recommend to counties, take a look at your local law on occupancy tax. See if it meets the exact parameters in section 9, subsection 9 of this law, because you may want to actually amend to include that exact definition. Section 9, subsection 9 speaks to what an STRU is. You probably want to put that into your local law. For counties that do not have an occupancy tax already in state law, and there's a few of you, those counties would still be required to go to their legislature, ask for a home rule bill, and introduce a bill and get it passed, just as the other counties have already done so. You are not permitted to collect occupancy tax on STRUs unless you have enabling legislation already on the books. You already have an occupancy tax on the books. That's occupancy tax. When does that take effect, Ryan? Takes effect March 1st, as long as your occupancy tax law complies and matches and mirrors the state law. You might need to amend your local law first. But if you already have short-term rental units in your occupancy tax law, consult with your county attorney, but you're probably permitted to already be collecting occupancy tax. Infringement on existing contracts. Okay, what does that mean? Many counties, about 30 counties, have existing voluntary collection agreements for occupancy tax only with some providers in the marketplace. There is nothing in this law that prohibits you from continuing that relationship or starting new relationships. So what does that actually mean in practice? What that means is if your county decides, we're going to put the brakes on for right now, we're not going to set up a registry, but we still want to get some revenue from occupancy tax, you can enter into VCAs, voluntary collection agreements, with other providers, with other booking services, who could collect that tax and remit it to you on your behalf. There's nothing in this law that prohibits you from doing that. Okay, effective date, I'm just going to reiterate it. I already know I talked about this. Sales tax, March 1st, 2025. We've talked to state tax and finance. There's a little bit of a grace period, right? And I say that because the governor signed this law, Chapter 99, on February 28th. The sales tax collection piece and occupancy tax collection piece started 3 days later, March 1st. No, 2 days later, March 1st. So state tax and finance has created a little bit of a grace window to allow vendors to come up to speed. Registry provisions take effect 275 days after February 28th, which is November 22nd. And if a county already has a registry that complies with this law and an occupancy tax that allows for the imposition and remittance of taxes on STRUs, we believe the county is entitled to collect and receive occupancy tax revenue. But again, you may want to amend your local law to include the new definition in Section 9, subsection 9. That's an overview of the legislation. Before I go to our next vote, I want to go back to Stephen.
Okay, great job, Ryan. And again, we will put this out to you, Ryan's talking points in a memorandum. You all have that, some FAQs. Let's take a few questions before we go to our one of our partners who's worked in this space from Deckard Technologies. And I do want to congratulate and thank our Governor Kathy Hochul, for signing the 2 chapters.
Yes.
These were trailblazing pieces of legislation, hard fought through the state legislature, the industry itself, very involved, very constructive, trying to work through and really create what really turned out to be a fantastic law for the nation to see that so goes New York, so goes the nation. So
Yeah, this is really, I just want to emphasize this to our counties. You're kind of at the forefront of this. This does not exist across our nation right now. There's some elements of this that exist in Canada, but by and large, we're kind of pioneers on the forefront.
globally.
Globally, yes.
Globally. So let's take a few questions before we go to Dustin. Let me ask the first one, Ryan or Dave or Commissioner, contacts for the platforms.
Yes.
Lots of questions have come in. How does the county have an obligation to, or how can we get some context for the various platforms? Does the tax department have something like that?
Dave Lucas.
Dave?
I don't know what the tax department has at this time
Okay.
For the initial contact of the sales tax.
So we'll follow up with that question on contacts, get as many as we can. We'll flag it for the state. What happens to reservations paid for prior to April 21st, 2025? Is sales tax expected to be paid or not?
Yeah, that's one of these gray areas. So technically, beginning March 1st, they have to pay sales tax for any stay that's after March 1st. I think that's going to fall into this grace period, Stephen.
Okay.
But Dave, I don't know if you have any other guidance beyond that for tax.
Yeah, it's our understanding in sales tax enforcement, which is a state responsibility and a state process through their audit capability. They talk about this as a soft opening, so to speak, this March 1st date, because there was very little time to notify vendors once the bill was signed and the effective date turned over. So that's really going to be up to the discretion of tax and finance to determine, how long is that grace period going to last. We are receiving calls from individual hosts across the state saying, well, what do? I rented, but I didn't collect sales tax, and we're deferring them. We're sending them over to the tax department to get more information.
Well, let's talk about that, Dave. Probably a few individuals are doing their own short-term rentals without going through a platform. Can you talk a little bit about, do those homeowners have to register with the county and remit sales and occupancy tax very similar to the platforms?
Yes, they have the same responsibility under the law. So they will need to do it. If they're out there and able to rent even if they're doing it through newspaper rentals, it doesn't matter if they're using an electronic format or not, or doing direct contracts with people they've rented to on a recurring basis over many years, which happens a lot. Sometimes they refer to it as going off book. I know some of the platforms refer to it that way. There's still a responsibility to reflect the sales tax and the occupancy tax under the law.
Okay. We had questions for contents at the State Department of Tax and Finance for sales tax, Ryan. In our FAQs, Dave, can we put a contact for the state? Yes.
Yeah,
we will leave that. We'll put that in there. I don't think that this is a criminal offense that can be referred to the office of the district attorney, Ryan.
No.
There's a question there. No on the enforcement on the district attorney. Yes on the referral to the office of the attorney general.
That's correct.
Okay. Another question, Ryan, is there an expectation that the property owners requirements, as well as the evidence that the coverage would extend to the property's use as a short-term rental? So evidence of liability coverage, is that included in there?
They have to provide evidence of liability coverage. That's part of the registration process.
Okay. What about if towns, cities, and villages did not have a registry before the law was passed on March 3rd or March 1st, 2025? As of that date, are they precluded from establishing a registry after that date?
No, not yet. They're precluded once you hit 275 days. So on November 22nd, no new local registries, but up until November 22nd, yes, local municipalities can do so.
Ryan or Dave, does the state law require any specific data, information that needs to be included in the county's registry file? Now, I assume the county's registry file, Ryan, is the link that's required to be on the county's website. Can you handle that question?
Yeah, so the way this is going to work is the law requires every county to have an explicit, visible link on your website to register. So a homeowner, a host will click on that link. They'll type in their registration information, which are all the fields in the law. That will, if you use a third-party provider, they will be able to give that to you, or the county could simply set up that as a homegrown system, manage it yourself, and set it up like a database almost.
Talk about if the county opts out, Ryan. Is there a penalty for opting out? No. Can you explain the opt-out procedure? They could always opt back in at a later point in time, but there is a date for opting out.
December 31st, 2025. You have to pass a local law opting out by December 31st, 2025.
No penalty.
No
Okay.
penalty.
So we have over 1,500 short-term rentals in existence right now. Does the law require the county to give them all a new registration before they can rent on the short-term rental platform or on their own?
No, you can use the existing registration number you've already provided for those hosts. You can populate that into this new registry.
Can you talk again about the April 21st, 2025 date? What is the relevance of the effective date of that section? I don't think it's relevant for sales tax collection, and it's not relevant for hotel tax collection.
No.
Is it just the other versions of the law, or what is the relevance of the April 21st, 2025 date?
If you are outside of New York City, you don't need to worry about April 21st, 2025. That's for their Jacob Javits Convention Center.
Okay. Another question here. Yes, the question is, does the county control or set or determine the occupancy tax rate to be collected? Yes, through the state legislature. You have to have a local law and then a state law authorizing the hotel occupancy tax. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's correct. Most counties have an occupancy tax on the books. You went to your Senate and Assembly member, they introduced a bill, it passed, it signed, it expires every so often in most cases. That law sets your occupancy tax rate. It's what you charge your hotels and motels right now. That would be the same rate charged to short-term rental units.
The grace period is not defined. So that's the answer to that question. Is the grace period defined? No. The tax department is doing the best they can under circumstances that require or that there was some delay through no fault of their own. The state is giving a small grace period to have that host remit the taxes. Are hotels, which list their rooms on the short-term rental service, considered a short-term rental, which must then register in the new registry, or does the hotel who does this, who lists their rooms as part of Expedia or Airbnb, does it depend on how they're organized?
It does. It depends on how they're organized. So if you're a hotel that you're using hotels.com and it is a direct sale through your property, that is treated just as an existing hotel stay would be now. However, if you are using a booking service like VRBO or Airbnb or something else, that would be considered an STRU, and they would need to register with this new registry. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take two more questions, and then keep sending in your questions because we're going to use these questions in the FAQs. They're excellent. We've got 25, 30 more questions in the queue. Keep sending them. We'll answer them in an FAQ document. We'll get them out because I want to get to Deckard Technology because you need to see in real life, real-time example of this. Ryan and Dave, let me take two more. Can you talk a little bit more about the opt-out provisions where you can collect, that you can't collect the occupancy tax? So let's say a county opts out of this law. Can you talk about the occupancy tax? Because I still think that that is owed if there's a hotel local law tax in place.
It is, as long as your local occupancy tax includes the definition of STRUs. Whether you have a registry or not, it's still owed. The disadvantage for you, if you will, to not having a registry is you have to continue the existing process you're using now, essentially to get occupancy tax, which is a very manual exhaustive system.
Okay, let me add one on top of that. County opts out,
Yes,
has the hotel occupancy tax local law. To date, it's dealt with hotels.
yes,
Is the sales tax owed
yes.
if the county opts out? Answer to that is?
Sales tax is owed regardless of opt-out or if not. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, please submit, that'll be it for the questions right now, but we are collecting them. Please send them in. We have dozens of questions that have come in. Very helpful, very constructive. Ryan, let's go to Dustin. I'll turn it over to you to introduce Dustin, and we'll have him walk through how to implement his services here, which we do find have been fantastic. We've seen a number of different examples that he has showed us. We'll turn it over to you to introduce Dustin.
Sure. So joining us, folks, is Dustin Rylick, Vice President of Sales Government Relations at Deckard Technologies. They are a technology company that can inject themselves in working with you to develop the registry, implement the registry, do an auditing practice for your sales and hotel occupancy tax collection procedures. They're really there as they can be a turnkey solution for you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dustin and he can show you an example of how this is working. So Dustin, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you very much, Stephen and Ryan and Dave. I also want to thank you for your leadership on a statewide basis in bringing forward such great and strong legislation that I'm also seeing across the nation, where other states are actually picking up a lot of the terminology that you've put in and things of that nature. State of California is looking to follow a lot of the same things that you have done there with your leadership from your senators and your governor, and of course from the New York State Association of Counties. I want to jump in and do a quick grab of my screen here. Why it is not grabbing. This is why we did this morning. I apologize. I am having trouble.
Let's, we'll go back to, we're gonna have to move on, Dustin. If you can't queue that up, we've got a lot of questions to get to.
Let's go ahead and go with some questions. I apologize.
Okay.
It's not allowing me to share at this point.
Okay, so is the county abilities to go to the Attorney General only for enforcement of the registry violations, or is it also for collection enforcement? I would think it is not for collection enforcement.
Registry enforcement only.
If a city and a county each have a hotel occupancy tax in place, will the short-term rental host pay taxes to both, or will it be the county's responsibility to handle the occupancy taxes and remit that back to the local government?
No. So that's a great question. If you have a town that has an occupancy tax rate and your county does, that host has to pay both occupancy taxes. The county is not responsible for collecting all of them and remitting down to the locals.
Okay, one more here while we're waiting for Dustin. Is the platform required to collect both occupancy and sales tax? Some platforms are not labeling the tax that they are collecting the same in New York. Is it difficult to assure that both taxes are being collected by the platform?
Right, so there's no mandate that the platforms collect occupancy and sales tax. There is an option for them to do so, Stephen. It's up to an arrangement between the host and the platform for that provision.
All right, the last question here is, how does the original laws dealing with hotel occupancy taxes play into this? The county here is unusual, where the state law exempts short-term rentals with 6 units or less from collecting occupancy tax, and they're not allowed to require them to collect it. They may have to update that local law.
You're going to have to update your local law. The good thing is you do not need to go to the state and get a new law. You can do so by going through the regular local law procedure at your county.
Who's responsible for remitting the occupancy tax to the county? the host or the booking service.
Okay, so it's on the host. However, if the host can demonstrate that the booking service is doing it on their behalf, the booking service can do it.
Justin, are you ready now?
Yeah, are you seeing my screen at this point in time?
It is small, but we can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
All right, very good. What I want to start with is everything comes back to data, right? And you want to make sure that, first of all, you have the discovery of data and making sure that you know exactly what's operating within your jurisdiction. The way we've designed a system is to be able to data mine all of the localized sites that you have, in addition to the big sites that are out there, such as Expedia Group, Booking, Airbnb, Mr. B&B, you name it. This is just a snapshot of Sullivan County, which is a client of ours that has almost 1,500 short-term rentals. And as you can see, we also can look at which ones are licensed and which ones are not presently licensed, so that then from a compliance standpoint, you can actually work with that local hosting platform to make sure that these properties are properly licensed. So an example of this property at 6 Emerald Lane in Swan Lake, you would know exactly when bookings have happened over time. You would know the different platforms they've been on over time, even if they're not live today, or if they are live today, such as the 2 Airbnb listings on this. We also tie everything back to the parcel data, but for purposes of transparency and not actually sharing personal information, I'm not going to scroll that high on this screen. But we do see who the host is, whether they're putting their short-term rental license number into the advertisement, what they're advertising in the way of bedrooms and bathrooms. We do a actual historical PDF of the property every single week so that you see exactly when they have been live or have not been live. And then the key is that the data is going to be discovered. You're going to know about all of the bookings that have happened, all of the different information that is out there. And then we go to an educational state. The educational state is driving our constituents, driving our hosts, driving the actual the online hosting platforms to do the right thing and drive the registration locally. We keep it simple, we keep it easy. I went outside of the state of New York to show you something in Arizona so that I'm not sharing local data, but we would have that link on your site so that you can go in and grab all the requirements that are specific to what your needs are there locally. The application, the property information about the registrant, as well as property contacts. So anyone that may be an emergency contact that's within 30 minutes in case a party breaks out or something of that nature. Any details about the property that you wish to know, all of the listings that are involved, all of the different documentation that you may want uploaded, copies of the insurance, declarations that are required, all of these things can be gathered during the registration process. And then we can do a confirmation of that data, collect a payment for the registration from the registrant, and then they would become a live and active registered property. Now, at that point, we then have the ability to help you with auditing that information and even providing a public portal so that the different hosts that are in your community have the ability to see whether a property is properly licensed or not properly licensed. This will actually be something that we can set up a direct API with some of the larger providers. We've already been contacted by Expedia Group, the owner of Verbo. We'd be more than happy of doing that with all of the large platforms, Booking and Airbnb, so that they have direct access to all of this different information, so they know who are those registrants that are already properly registered with their permit number, when they got it, all their contact information, and so forth, so that you have this. This is a public registry in the city of La Quinta, California, so that's why I'm okay with showing it. They're properly registered properties there locally in their marketplace by HOA, by development name. And that's very important to know as well, is that the GIS shape files are there. So if you do have a city, a town, a village, or even an HOA, homeowners association within a jurisdiction that does not allow short-term rentals, we can help to facilitate during that registration process a pop-up window that says, unfortunately, short-term vacation rentals are not allowed in your area. So the registration process helps your cities, your towns, your villages, your HOAs with covenants and restrictions within their HOAs to be able to manage this process from a compliance standpoint. Then we get to one more thing. This is the back end of all of those different properties being registered so that you have all of the information as it comes in so your staff can actually do the registration of that property. And then we also help with taxation. So we can actually help with tax audits and things of that nature for the state, for the county, if they need us to be involved in that. But really, what's being driven here is the registration process that Ryan and Stephen and Dave, your senators, your governor have really led the way on creating this ability to be able to register the properties properly so that then you make sure that you have all of the details that you need to make sure that all of your properties are paying their occupancy tax and their sales tax. I can probably end there, Stephen and Ryan, so that you're giving back some time for all of your different questions.
Okay, I want to thank Deckard Technologies, in particular Dustin, for the great work that you're doing for Sullivan County. You're also working in a number of other New York counties, several New York counties, on implementing this new statute. And I want to thank you for doing that. There are other platforms or programs that counties may use or take advantage of, but we have found Deckard Technologies to be an exceptional provider of this service. So thank you, Dustin. Ryan and Dave, let's go back to take a few more questions. Again, please submit your questions in the chat, question line 9. We can continue to go back at them. Dave, is the allocation of a platform sales tax going to be listed separately on a state tax department sales tax report to the county?
No, you would have to request a special report from Tax and Finance, and I know many of the CFOs and treasurers have done that before. I forget the name of the report, but you can get a report from them that lists which vendor submitted how much sales tax. So Airbnb would show up and the big platforms. It would go down to the individual STR hosts too if they're doing it on their own.
Ryan, can the county require existing registrants for a county to re-register with the new registry that will have to have an online host?
Yeah, yes, you absolutely could do that.
Are the counties going to continue to receive occupancy taxes directly? Yes.
It will be direct to you. It's not going to the state and down, it's direct to the county.
Is it acceptable for counties to have a single registry for short-term rentals and then other kinds of lodging, hotel, motel, etc.?
You could set it up that way, sure.
Is there a benefit of having an existing, or is there a benefit? Let's put it this way. Is there a penalty for opting out?
No penalty for opting out.
What is the benefit of opting in?
Okay, so the benefit of participating is you have an electronic database to be able to verify and do that audit control function back to occupancy tax. Because you don't know, right? Like if you don't have a database that shows listed registered properties versus hosts that are listing or hosts that are operating outside of a registry, you don't really know if you're collecting all of the occupancy tax revenue. That would be the advantage of a registry.
Okay, please submit your questions into the question line as we come up within the hour here. We'll take a few more questions. Let's talk about if a public university rents a dorm room over the summer for guests, that would be, well, if it's longer than 30 days, it wouldn't be part of this. But let's say if a college rents a dorm room over the summer for guests, is that considered a short-term rental subject to the occupancy and the sales tax?
That is a terrific,
It have to be
terrific
under 30
question.
days, right?
Yeah, you know, the law speaks to.
Or whatever your local law would say.
Section 5 includes a section on exemptions. You know, that's a really, that's a great question. If it's less than 30 days, I would say no. If it's more than 30 days, then you get into a gray area.
Okay, it's my understanding, David and Ryan, that the platforms themselves are not required to collect the hotel occupancy tax, but they are required to collect the sales tax. The question has come in that the individual here thought that the law says that the platform must collect both taxes. I don't think that's true.
No, they can collect on behalf of the host as long as the host can demonstrate that the booking service is facilitating the renting of your property, the hosting of your property. As long as you can demonstrate that, then yes, the booking service can collect occupancy tax and remit it to the county.
Okay.
I think, Stephen, if I may for 1 second, I would project that most booking platforms will probably do that function on behalf of their hosts as a benefit for an individual working with that platform. That would be my assumption.
Can Deckard Technologies assist with the hotel occupancy tax collection?
Absolutely, yes.
How so?
The registration system can flag, you will be able to see for all the hosts that are registered, have they paid occupancy tax, have they paid sales tax, and how much? That data has to be reported to the county.
Okay, here's another question here. The county adopted a law in 23, so a few years ago, to add short-term rentals to the hotel occupancy local law.
Yep.
They have a voluntary payment agreement in place right now with a platform. We prefer not to have to re-register the thousands of short-term rentals and instead just have the platform operators remit the occupancy tax to the county quarterly.
Yes.
Under the new laws, can we opt out of that provision and continue the existing VCA arrangement?
You absolutely can, 100%.
Okay, that was a great question. And so again, I think we have time for a few more questions here. We've got about 2-3 minutes.
Here we go.
Interpreting the law to require platforms to collect and remit local occupancy taxes for counties that have applied them to short-term rentals. Can you please inform us where in the law this is for the collection if it's made optional?
Sure. Just takes a few minutes here.
So again, the question is, we interpret the law to require the platforms to collect and remit the occupancy taxes for counties that have applied them to short-term rentals. So again, we're taking a number of questions on this, Dave, about occupancy tax collection and sales tax collection. It has been our understanding that it's just sales tax. So now we've had several questions come in here that the platform is required to collect both forms of taxation.
Yeah, I think part of the issue there is whether the host wants the platform to do it for them. And if they don't want that responsibility or they want to do it on their own, the host, then the host would be responsible. So there is an issue. I've interpreted the law, and I'm not an attorney, so I always defer to your county attorney.
Or the State Department.
Or the State Department tax. But on a local occupancy tax, I will tell you right now, the tax department won't help you with questions because it's not a state administered tax. They said that's your local law. You need to comply in those situations. So on local occupancy tax, there is language in the bill, and we would have to find it and send it out, that says a vendor would be responsible for satisfying state tax laws as well as local laws. So I interpret that to mean if you have a local occupancy tax, vendors would have a responsibility depending on what their contractual relationship is with their host.
I would point folks for questions, consult with your county attorney and look at section 14 of the bill.
Okay,
How about we take this one question here, Stephen? Previous FAQ.
okay. We have just one last question we'll take up here that counties with an occupancy tax exemption based on the number of reliable rentable units could not just amend their local law to remove the exemption without going to the state legislature. Can you talk about the steps with a prior local occupancy? You would need to go back to the state legislature.
If it's in state statute,
Yeah.
likely you would have to. If it's part of your local law, you can amend that locally.
Yeah. Dave, do you want to give further clarity? I agree with Ryan on that. If it's in your local law, but not in the state law, yes, you can amend it locally.
I agree with that. There's a handful of counties that their occupancy tax law is written to the state statute. And there were probably, the details of that law would probably have to be adjusted by the state. And also any county, because your local occupancy tax law is authorized by the state. If you want to change your rate, you're still going to have to come back to the legislature to change the rate.
Yes.
How about auditing? Counties can also audit the hosting platforms, which is easier than auditing individual hosts. A question on the audit provisions of, well, I imagine that on sales tax, it would be the state of New York, not us.
On sales tax, it'd be the state of New York. On local occupancy tax, yeah, counties can audit the hosting platforms, which would be much easier than individual hosts. As long as the platforms are collecting and remitting occupancy tax. Otherwise, you'd have to do it on an individual basis.
Okay, let's go to our three panelists here for closing remarks. Please type in a couple of questions that you have now. We will again collect those questions and answers. I want to thank everybody. Again, I really want to thank our governor, Kathy Hope. This was groundbreaking legislation. It was not easy to pass this piece of legislation. I credit the state Senate, the state Assembly, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the leader of the Senate, Speaker Carl Hastie in the Assembly, the diverse needs of this state. Ryan, I think we really threaded a needle, and congratulations to the state of New York on getting this done. Let's do some closing 30-second comments from Ryan, Dave, and Dustin. Ryan, we'll start with you, go to Dave, and then to Dustin, some closing comments.
Sure. I mean, again, just to reiterate, there's a lot of questions. We're pioneers in this. You all are on the forefront lines on this implementation of this new law. It doesn't really exist across the country, I'm sorry. So we will continue to be a resource to collect questions, answer them to the best of our ability. I always, and I think if Patrick Cummings was here, he would encourage you always to work with your county attorney on the interpretation of the law. And I would just say, that there needs to be a little bit of, I would encourage everyone to have a little bit of flexibility in the collection of taxes, right? And the establishment of the registry. It's going to take folks a little bit of time. It's going to take your county a little bit of time. That's why it's 275 days for the registry. But continue to feed us information, and we're here as a resource for you.
Ryan, before I go to Dave, what portion of the law, the section of the law deals with the cost of using Deckard Technologies? There is an ability that the county would not be responsible for paying for services to assist in setting up the registry. Can you just give a 20-second or a 15-second talk about the costs of using a Deckard Technologies or another service provider?
Sure. So the county is enabled under the statute, under Section 4, under registration. You can establish a registration fee that includes the actual and necessary cost associated with construction, operation, and maintenance of the registry and enforcement of the article. So what that means is, let's say Deckard or another provider gives you a cost of what it would cost for you to implement this. You can build that in and develop a registration fee based off of that.
Thank you, Ryan. Dave, closing comments, and then we'll go to Dustin.
Yeah, I can't add that much to what Ryan said. It's a work in progress. Defer to your county attorney in a lot of these situations. This is something that we will continue to come back on as we learn more, or if things are defined, or if the state steps in and adds more regulations, or at some point. But this isn't unusual for counties. For those of you that manage the tax foreclosure process, we all do it a little bit different. Each county, has their own procedures. You have your own relationships with judges. So it's not a one size fits all approach all the time. So we'll have to work through it as we go.
Okay, terrific. I want to remind folks that we are taking this up at the NYSAC Finance School. Dates of that, Dave, you remember the dates for the NYSAC Finance
It's May 7th, 8th, and 9th, and we'll be in Queensbury, New York.
May 7th, 8th, and 9th will be in Warren County, New York, not in Queensbury, in Warren County, New
Yes,
York.
right. Queensbury Hotel.
We deal with counties here, and that's in Warren County. Dustin, folks want to know how to get a hold of you. I don't know if you want to give us your email or put it in.
Definitely.
But we'll give you a few seconds to close, and then we'll conclude today's webinar.
Excellent. Well, I do want to close by saying thank you to New York State Association of Counties and their leadership. I also want to say that keeping things simple, making sure that you engage with a company like ourselves that we love the partnership with New York State Association of Counties as well, so that we can help you to discover where all of these short-term vacation rental properties are. Make sure that you know who all of the hosts are, make sure you know who all of the owners are, and then being able to educate them on these new processes. And we help to do that outreach on your behalf in sending letters out to them and driving them to register for you. And it's all about simplicity, keeping it simple for your host, keeping it simple for the platforms so that they have a nice, easy way to do this. And then we can help you with auditing everything as well. So I will close in saying thank you so much for your time, Stephen, Dave, and Ryan. Any questions, you can get a hold of myself, Dustin, D-U-S-T-I-N, at Deckard, DECKARD.com. That's my email. And I also have a Northeast Director of Sales, Dave Brown. He is a simple Dave, D-A-V-E, at Deckard, DECKARD.com. We already have done several demos for many of your jurisdictions, for many of your counties. We're more than happy to engage. It takes a half hour to 45 minutes for your staff. We'll set up a meeting, we'll do a Zoom with you and be able to show you your actual county and what's going on in your county with all the listings and what's going on. We appreciate the partnership. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Okay, Dustin. Ryan and David, it looks like based on the questions that we got, we probably should do another webinar at the end of April. So we might do just one more webinar and we'll see if we, as Ryan said, this is going to take some time to implement and work through all of these various changes and things. I want to thank everybody for our presenters today, Ryan Gregoire, David Lucas, and Dustin Rylek from Deckard Technologies. And most importantly, thank all of you for signing on today and doing the great things that you do in your county. That will conclude today's webinar. We will get this recording on our website at the end of today, as well as the FAQs from today's session. Thank you. Have a great day.